I've never been more excited to call myself an Indian. I mean, my mom's side was from India, my dad's side from Iran. And of course, we're not gonna just break down this music video, we're gonna learn how to create this exact look. And if you're sick and tired of spending hours building a look, and then when you copy paste that look to the next shot, it does not translate through, and you're looking for a solution, Qazi's toolkit is it. Right now, you can download it for free as a demo version, play around with it, and more importantly, videos that I've been putting out recently, I am using certain tools from my toolkit. So this way you can actually practice along while watching the tutorial. Links to all of that is going to be in the description. Just scroll down on the page and you will find the free demo. So give it a shot. And on that note, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon so you can be notified about future content. Let's roll the intro. All right, guys, let's get it. So cool.
Wait a minute, get it how you live it. 10 toes in when we standing on business. I'm a big stepper, underground the thoughts. God not.
All right, so something that just jumps out right away is the halation, right? And the grain. So, I mean, it looks good. It looks good. Like, at first when I watched it on YouTube, I'm just like, eh. I mean, it's not so much about the color, it's the editing, it's the music, like all that, right? Like, it's such a hardcore song. Like, I love it. But then I started paying attention to it and I'm like, I brought it in Resolve and I started looking at it and I'm like, okay, there's a lot going on here. So that's what we're going to be unpacking in this video, right? Because when you first see shots like this, you're just like, okay, it's a very monochromatic image, which it is. Look at the waveform. But then we do get to see these other tones. It's not like there's just an absence of other colors. I mean, we're seeing that blue too. By the way, first of all, I've been to one of these things. This is all real. So anybody from the Western world looking at this thinking like this is fake, this is not fake. I've been to one of these. This is a real thing. Now, I don't know if this video, I haven't done enough research to know if this is like CG or real, but I've seen this with my own eyes. This is a real thing, and it is one of those things that you got to experience once in your life. It's super sick. Okay, so what's happening? Highlights are blowing out. Good amount of contrast. We see that. Healthy amount of contrast. We can just look at our waveform and see it, like right here, right? We're basically kissing the bottom around like this point which is my sweet spot. We're getting there. But what's more important is something that I want to point out is that in the midtones, it's sort of gentle. It's a very healthy amount of contrast. So that's why any time when we get close to him and we look at his skin tones and everything, like it's not like all of a sudden his armpit hair is like black, right? So there's enough detail there. To see our guy just fine, and they just blew out the background, right? So that's like whatever. Like, I mean, it's just like, let's not sacrifice our hero. And that's one of the things that should be the main focus of every colorist. Like, grade for your subject, grade for your hero, whatever that might be. I graded a music video where the artist told me that the hero is my country. And I want to show the beauty of my country in this song. So then I forgot about the artist and I graded around the country, around the environment. So it's always going to be like your subject first, right? So here what I'm seeing is like they did it right by our dude, right? Like he just always, like, look at, like, this is pretty gentle. I mean, look at where everything is sitting, right? From shot to shot. So what I really want to do is like, I want to go and turn on some charts and like really look at the data, like what are we getting? So I'm going to be using QT charts. By the way, you can get QT charts. You can download it for free, the demo version, and play around with it if you want to follow along. But in general, like you're familiar with false color, and that's what I'm using in our charts. And I feel like it's a very clear representation versus like using the false color inside Resolve. So that's why I'm using this. But what we get to see is like I said, the outside is blown out. And we can see it right here. It's just pretty much gone. a lot of the image is living in this world, and then the highlights are living around here. But still, if I turn it off, like, I mean, there's just detail everywhere. So it's not like anything is gone. And then look at the blacks are lifted to the point where they're not even in the 0.05% right here. And that's where the image like breathes, right? So like when we look at this or when we look at our dude, right? And they're doing it for him, right? They're doing it for him because even in his hair, there's so much detail. Like look at where his hair is sitting and we can actually see it, right? And that's going to be the ongoing theme for majority of these shots. And now what I want to do is if we go and look at our sat false color, that will really get to tell us the overall saturation in our image. Okay, so if I go here, right, and if we just click and see what's really going on here and look at these shots, majority of the shots during the day, our guy lives somewhere around here, which is a pretty healthy amount of saturation for skin tones, right? So like it's sitting like somewhere around here. Good amount of like saturation. But what was interesting is like if you keep going down during the night, like right here, it gets really saturated. And now he starts to live around here. So that's a big jump from 0.9 to 10, like 10. Like, you know, and it just, everything gets like more saturated at night. And you can just like really see it. And I like it, right? Like, I mean, because, you know, give or take, right? Like you got bright during the day. So that's going to make your image pop and you're going to focus on it. And then at night, you know, the actual juice is going to come from colors. Like it might get darker, but it gets deeper and you get like better colors. And that's what's happening here. So we have more saturation. How about if we look at his skin tones? Now let's just look at like where his skin tones are sitting for the entire piece. And they're pretty consistent. Like if we look at the skin tones here, let's go back to this view. And if we look at this guy's skin tones compared to our guy's skin tones, they're all sitting, there's a lot of like purple in there. And we can attest to it. Let's just go and find a cleaner shot on him. So even if we go here, right? And there's a lot of like purple in there. And if I come out and if I look at the skin tones, like I can see that that's exactly what's happening, right? So even if we go here and if we turn this on, how much purple is in there? So then this really gets to tell us, especially when we're trying to incorporate that kind of thing into our own grade, which is exactly what I did here, right? So, I mean, this is my shot. I downloaded it from Artlist. So if we go from here, right? So like, I mean, this is, it blends in like it belongs here. And then same thing is going to happen here. You know, because I mean, that's not the case. Because if I were to turn all of these off and show you this is our Rec 709. This is our log shot on Alexa Mini. So we got here. It would have been impossible without these charts to like really know where I need to go. That's why I like utility charts and like these kind of tools are so important, and they're it's just not really easy to look at your scopes and try to mimic that, right? Because I mean, I can just like look at the scopes and read them all day long, but it's not really telling me the actual thing, like the granular thing that I know to like nail those certain things. But again, like when I'm here and I'm looking at my skin and I'm going, okay, this is what I need to do. Then I can go here and I can turn this on and okay, this is exactly where my skin is sitting. Nailed it. Like what else, right? Okay, let's look at the saturation levels. I'll look at the saturation levels. Majority of my image lives here. And then there's a little bit of that. Okay, let's go and look at what's happening with our guy. And then if we go here and we turn on sat false color, that's exactly what's happening. It's living here. And then there's a little bit of that in the highlights. So nailed it, nailed it. And then when you do that, it becomes super, super easy, like to go from here. It just goes. It's gonna go, right? Like I'm gonna come in here, I'm gonna look at this, and I'm gonna go here. It's all matching. But if I were to take all of this and give you this, I mean, that's not the same shot. There's a lot of things, a lot of hues we had to compress. There's a lot of contrast that we had to add. individually in areas. Like, we couldn't just do like a blanket contrast and pivot because we really needed to get in there. And we're going to create that at the end of it. And I'm going to show you like how we did that. But I mean, we're going places to create that look. So while creating that look is when I realized that there's a lot of magic happening here. They did a really good job. And if I were to like really just sum it up, looking at this shot, like what's really going on, I mean, the whites look pretty good, right? So we have to agree, like the whites are looking pretty good. Yes, they're a little bit leaning toward like, I mean, they're leaning a little bit toward like warm tones, and we see it like in our histogram too. And that is true. And then when we look at our low end, there is no pure black. Like, look at where our reds are sitting. So this staircase that's being created here, that means like, there's a lot of red in our shadows. Okay. So our reds are lifted. And I had to do a similar thing here to lift our reds instead of like, creating a really nice color contrast, because that's not what we're going for. And you're going to see like this is exactly what's happening here too. The reds are lifted, then green, then blue. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. Red, green, blue. And it becomes very easy when you look at it to see what they're doing. And another thing that I noticed was like that there was color compression going on. Like if I just go through these shots and show you like all of these, right? They all come together. Like if you look at this entire thing, it's not like every hue is sitting in its own world. And we can see the vector scope to just tell us that everything is condensed and squished and in one quadrant. So that is a very, very important information for creating a look like that, because it wasn't bleach bypass. At first I thought, oh, it's bleach bypass, it's going to be easy. And then I went in there and started creating it. I'm like, you dummy, because look at the highlights and they have so much color. Like the highlights are not pure white. They have color. So, but what makes this music video what it is like monochromatic, muted tones, with color compression and gentle contrast in the middle, healthy amount of contrast on the low end, and then blown out highlights. But that really serves like what they're going for, right? But because they're not grading for outside and they're grading for their man and everybody in the arena or whatever you would want to call it, like inside, indoors, then they're not necessarily worrying about whatever the hell is happening outside. But like you can see every single thing here. Nothing is blown out. Everything is so protected. And it actually looks really good. Now, some areas get really, really saturated, because when I was looking at this shot, I was like, what the hell? So if I go here and turn this on and we look at our saturation false color, I mean, there's a lot of juice here. Like this shot gets pretty freaking, like this is a lot of color, right? Like this is kind of crazy. But again, it all looks so freaking good. This is the first time like where the hair is actually looking black, because I feel like in other shots, like it just has like red undertones, and that could also be because of the halation around it that's pulling it. I really love where they kept the skin tones. So if I go in my false color again and look at where he's sitting in a sweet spot, and then a little under and a little over, right? But he's like living between 0.35, 0.45, and 0.55. And, there's obviously some shadows like 0.25, like around here. But this just makes it like a really, really sweet spot for his skin. And there's just like so much meat. If we keep going. So like, again, see, like they're not worried about outside at all. And then even on the low end, like the contrast is very, very gentle if we see. Halation is like hardcore. So all that is great. I love that shot too. And this kid's eyes are crazy. It's like such light brown. Like I thought this like a visual effects or something. So all of this is like just so good. And finally, they're pulling the reds down a little bit to like close the gap, because I feel like initially there was like just more warmth in the undertones. And I feel like they're kind of just pulling it down, because at the end of the day, and not everything needs to be teal and orange, but just by pulling and creating a little bit of like color contrast, it always helps. Like even just having this color, like this teal rails, just add something to it. My eye, at least as a colorist, my eye goes there, right? And I go, that's kind of cool. Like, right? So like, his skin tones against that looks kind of cool. And it creates that color separation. And then at night, what I noticed, which was very interesting, is that this is where the skin tones are very different. So these two shots felt like the most different out of everything. So like if we look at all of these, right, they're still like all falling in the same category as the beginning. So it's like magenta skin tones. But then these two shots just like go super green. And then the skin is in okay and barely in like teal. So they just like felt, kind of like very different. And again, when you play it in a flow, it works.
Yes, worth it. Moving to the money like it's urgent. Hands on God, so I'm in it like a surgeon. The skin color like the bourbon. Worldwide sign, and we face close curtains. I hear you, nothing of a certain.
Right? So like, I mean, it still kind of goes, and even like with what he's saying, like it kind of works. But then we go back into that like more magenta-ish red world. And then we just basically keep getting more and more into that world. Like, look at that. And then this is where it's going to become more yellow, right? So it's an okay, and then it's green. So last few shots, and I think this is also going to be green, and then okay in there. So in general, the entire video, and obviously it's not like, it was like completely monochromatic. It had other tones, but we can clearly see like throughout the video, the hues were carefully put together and they were brought closer, by using some sort of color compression. But overall, I think these guys did a really, really good job. So if I were to go here, let's go to version 2 and let's just delete it and then rebuild it to like what I'm doing. So basically right now what we got going on is input device transform RE to DaVinci Wide Gamut to Rec 709. And then if I create a new node, we can balance our image. And to be honest with you, I think the balance is not bad. Like it's kind of like sitting where I want it to be. I kind of want it to be in a magenta red world, and it's kind of already there. So I'm not going to mess with it right now, but if I need to get in there, I will. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to change my gamma to linear because it gives me photometric abilities, just like if I were to use my HDR palette's global offset, and it works just like that, especially when I use my gain. So I'm going to pull it down. And like basically the changes are very uniformed and they're perfect for when you're shot matching. So that's why I just like love working in linear color space. So I'm going to keep it somewhere around here. And I feel like I'm getting more meat in my image. So I like that. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to create a new node. And here what I want to do is I want to throw a DCTL from my toolkit, and it's called Color Compressor. And I'm going to use that. Remember I said like, that's what's happening here in all of these shots, like how all the hues are like coming together, and we don't have that. So like these tones right now are not matching with this. Like these are more yellow than like this sort of magenta. So I want to bring that magenta in. So if I go and click show selected color, I think this is exactly the color I'm looking for. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this chart on so we can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to take my compression near, and I'm going to start doing this. I'm going to start pulling it down. And basically, my goal is this. My goal is to do this, what I just did, and like bring everything together. So look at like where all the hues are sitting, and now we're closing that gap. Okay? So look at how this magenta now started to get in this world. You see this? And then if I go to the next shot, like look at this. Seamless. Like we're getting there, right? So I like that. And now what I want to do is I'm going to create a new node, and I'm going to drop a DCTL, same thing. Color compressor. And what I want to do here is I want to sort of counter that. Like I feel like we might have a little bit too much of like that magenta tones under here. So in order to pull those out, I'm going to turn these two on. And I'm going to move my target hue until we get like cleaner tones like that. And then I'm going to start moving my compression near. Like literally even something like that. And if I turn these two off, and if I do before and after, like you can see like the difference is very, very subtle. But it's giving me cleaner highlights. Like look at my highlights. It's cleaning that up. And it's cleaning the undertones. But it's still leaving like the main yellow that we took out of our image and created that magenta. That is staying there, which is what I want. So that's great. Now what I want to do is I'm going to create a new node. I'm going to put it right here. And I'm going to drop in another DCTL and let's call it film density. And in that, I just want to kind of pull my reds down. So I'm going to go this far. I don't want it to affect my face as much, although I don't mind it, but I just don't want it to affect my face as much. So I'm going to keep my reds right here, and then I'm going to keep pulling that. I don't want it to affect a little bit of my face, but majority of it, I want it to affect my reds. And it is. It's like, you can see it in the waveform clearly, like how thin this red was and now how rich that red is. So I like that. I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to create a new node. I'm going to drop another DCTL, and this time I'm going to select Skin Juice Mixer. And what I want to do here is that one thing that I'm noticing, so I'm going to do something. I'm going to click on these shots. I'm going to do split screen. And then I'm going to go here, turn off show outline. And now we really get to see the neighboring clips. And that's going to help me really dial everything in. And what I really want to do is I want to modify some hues to get these tones, right? So like I'm getting a bit too magenta right now, and I got to come out of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start messing with, first of all, I just need a little bit more saturation on my skin, as we can see right here. So I'm just going to start putting more saturation into my image. And I'm not afraid of like keeping it here because I'm going to pull that back in a second. If we go in our green versus magenta, like I just want to make sure that we keep that somewhere around here. And then let's do exposure for green versus magenta. Like this is looking pretty good. And then hue shift green versus magenta. And I like what I see here. And now I want to go in my global saturation and I want to pull it back. Okay, I'm just like looking at this arm. Where do I want to keep it? Even if I keep it somewhere around here, we're looking pretty good. So like, look at before, like how the overall image is just so magenta. And now we're actually pulling it in. But I feel like I just need to dial back the colors a little bit to match him better with this right here. In terms of what happened to the red, like I think if we just, it's too much, like where we're going with it, like, and we just want to bring a little bit more of that magenta, we just did that, okay? And now if I do before and after, like the skin tones are looking a lot nicer and warmer instead of just like super magenta. And we're getting pretty close to what we're seeing here. Can I pull the saturation up a little bit? We'll see how it plays out. So I'm going to keep it somewhere around here for now. I'm going to create my second to last node. I'm going to drop a DCTL. And what was one of the things that like stood out the most, it was halation. And I'm going to set it to 16. Okay, so that's going to do a big trick. Now let's turn on the grain that I'm using, and I'm using Film Look Creator, and I basically turned down the color blend and Film Look blend, and then turned off everything else minus grain, and then I changed the grain to 16 millimeter. Okay, so that gives me a thick, like really good grain. Like look at that. That mimics very closely to what we're seeing here. Okay, so that like really does everything that I need. And then the last node is going to be my Look DNA. And the only few things that I'm going to do here are that. I'm going to go in my undertones Y, and I'm just going to, so let's do a show graph, and I'm going to pull my undertones down just a little bit. And that's only because, let's do this. Let's turn this off and select this shot right here. And we just want to make sure that we have something like this happening. And then in my Y, highlights Y, I can bring it down if I want just a little bit. And you know what? Let's come down and maybe in the temp, we just add a little bit more warmth. And what happens if we do that? So like not too much. Even like something like this. And then here in the tint, I can pull it back maybe a little bit and then take my temp and just like add a little bit more warmth. And then let's turn the show graph off and go between these. So, I mean, it's pretty good, right? Like, look at that. Like, look at this saturation to this. I mean, to me, this is looking pretty good. And then another thing that we can do to check a few things, a litmus test, would be, let's look at the skin hue. And the skin hue right here, there's magenta, a lot of magenta, and then there's a magenta in the face. So that is looking good. Now let's look at our false color, where everything is sitting, and let's look at the false color here. And if we look at the false colors, what's happening, like when we look at the arm to like this, it's living exactly like in that world. So we're seeing that we're good there. And then in terms of our sat false color and our sat false color, so we have a little bit of magenta, we have no magenta, we don't have a lot of magenta. So basically we are a little bit more on the saturated side, but do not forget that what's happening here is that we have highlights. And what I mean by that is that like how it's like we don't have highlights here, right? Like this is a soft light that's coming through. So that's why there is no like one main focus area. But if we do want to control that, how I would control it is, let's go back and turn on this. And then I'm going to go under my saturation limiter and I'm going to start pulling this back until we still have some juice, but not as much. And now we control that. So if I go in my saturation limiter, so the beautiful thing about saturation limiter is that it, like, let's just keep some, like something like that. Like, I mean, we can pull it back a little bit, but even like something like this. So the beautiful thing about this is that it's going to leave all the other areas saturated, and it's only going to take the most nuke areas and it's going to just affect those. So now if I were to take all of this and do before and after, you can see the kind of mature image that we created and how important it was to build it the way we did to clean up like all that gunk, like yellow that was seeping in, like in all these areas. And like we were able to create a very mature monochromatic look that blends just right in. I mean, just look at it. So this one is looking super good. So I'm happy with that. Now what we're going to do is let's reset this. And I'm just going to copy paste what I created here. And obviously nothing works. So I'm going to undo my zoom. And now looking at this, there's some work that needs to be done, right? Because this just did not translate. Because going from this shot to this shot, I mean, we have some work to do here. So let's start with what we got going on here. So obviously we're going to have to bring the exposure up, right? And what I can do is that's where this comes in handy. Let's look at where I need to put my false color. And majority of the image is living in gray zone. And then that makes sense. Okay. So now if I go to my guy and go right here and we go to false color, I know what I need to do. So I'm going to go in here and keep raising this up to even something like this. And if I come out and see where we're sitting, it's not bad. The thing that we need to work on, I'm going to keep this here somewhere. We should start building some contrast. So I'm going to go in here And first of all, I'm going to undo my highlights because we need actually highlights here. So let's go in here, show curves, and add some highlights like that. And then let's go in our undertones and then just add a little bit of detail. So that right there does quite a bit. Now what I want to do is I want to come in here and I want to add those warm tones. So let's turn this off. And what we probably want to do is go here, just like this, go to this shot, and then start bringing in those tones, right? So like if I start going in that direction and see like how far do I have to go. Now, again, we don't have to be stupid, right? Like when it comes to matching, we just need to match what matches, and we don't need to make it absolutely artificial. So even if I do something like that, I'm liking what's happening. But then again, I just feel like we can bring up the image a little bit more right here. And, you know, maybe that will flow better. It is flowing better, right? Like I'm just like looking at this and that is going really well together, how this is moving. And then at that point, we don't necessarily need to add more mid contrast, but highlights, will they work? Okay. I mean, if anything, we need to loosen up a little bit. So Y contrast, I undid, and then even the undertones Y, I brought it up. And then in the meantime, what we can do is check a few things. So skin tones are sitting where they're supposed to be, magenta, and then rest is sitting in okay. And then what's happening with our sat false color? Sat false color is literally sitting where it's supposed to be, which is like majority of in the beginning, our guy was living in that world, right? So like he is in that, this guy is in that, and then we're in that. So this is like even a closer match than the other shot, just because the other shot had like highlights that were coming in. So like this should be a better match. Let's play it through from here. That's pretty good, right? So like, I mean, we went from this, that's our X709, that's our log. And then even if we just like break it down really quick, like what we did. So balance always goes a long way. Then our curves using our QT look DNA. And then this was like the key. Compress all the hues, right? Because like right now, everything is like just spread out. Greens in here, magentas here. So we brought it all together and then created a little bit of separation and cleaner highlights, right? And then after that, film density brings that down. And then our skin juice does quite a bit, eases off on the nuclear like orange that we got going on. And again, helps with like monochromatic vibe that we're going for. Halation does wonders, and that's what we end up with. I mean, the contrast gets harder at night, as it should, right? So like if you look at this, I mean, now we're sort of like really bottoming out, and we see it right here. Going from this shot to this shot, like, yeah, the color is so different, right? I mean, we can just see it, like even right here to right here. Like, look at this ground, look at this ground. They're not the same, right? And even if we look at it on a saturation level, we got this and we got this. I mean, this is like just bleeding. And then this one is barely anything, right? What does that tell us? That tells us nothing is the end of the world. I mean, this music video is collecting millions of views an hour, and nobody cares about that. That I'm not saying be sloppy, but what I'm saying is like, as a colorist, your job is to just keep things consistent and have gradual shifts, but don't have like a jarring, crazy jump from shot to shot. And that's what happened. It's like we go from this to this, we get closer to the light and we're kind of seeing that there's less saturation closer to the light. So then we're kind of buying that. And then the next one gets like less saturated. And then this one gets even cleaner. And then this one gets cleaner. And then we kind of exit out on that. So it's sort of like a transition into like ease off from like these saturated tones that we started building around here. This is the most saturated shot in the entire thing. And then it starts like weaving off of it. Right? And then, like I said, these two shots were like just felt so different because they were just so much on the green side. So if I do skin hue, we get to see like how they were just like completely somewhere else. Because I mean, look at this background and then look at this, you know, like ground under him, and then look at the ground under him here. So two completely different vibes. But again, coming out of like day scene into entering into the night, like, you know, or afternoon or evening, I'm buying it. I'm okay with it. But overall, this music video is so much fun. I had a blast just kind of going through and breaking it down and understanding like what was really going on. And hopefully you guys enjoyed like the looks that we ended up creating. And if you have a subscription to Artlist, obviously you can download these and then just like play around with me as I'm building these looks. And like I said, all these tools you can download for free as a demo version and play with it. So you can actually practice having these tools like, you know, at your disposal. So there you have it. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. If you have any other videos that you want me to cover in this reaction series, drop a comment below. If you enjoyed this video, do me a favor, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and do not forget to check out the free demo for the toolkit. I'm telling you, give it a shot. You will not be able to go back. And on that note, I will see you guys in the next one. Peace, fam.